So thank you very much. It's such a pleasure to be here. And I've just been so inspired today by all of the presentations. And I think that one of the biggest challenges that I see is that innovation really needs to go global. So we see a lot of grassroots projects, and they're wonderful. And we really need to solve the problem of how to take this at a larger scale, right? So in Rio, especially when we go to the slums, what we see the most is young women, 14 to 16 years old, pregnant. There are no boyfriends around, there are no husbands, they're just alone. But this is a scene that happens all around the world. It's not just in Brazil, it's not just in Rio. We've heard these stories all throughout. And I've actually been very, very lucky because I was not one of those girls, and I fortunately did not grow up in a slum, so I was extremely privileged. And that's a little bit about what I want to talk to you today, because I think that everyone in this room really has the responsibility to give back, because I think that we've all been very, very privileged. So I want to just start a little bit about talking a little bit about luck, because I think that I've been very, very lucky, right? I have a wonderful family that really, really supports me, and it's a family actually of a lot of women, and we're all named Annas, Anna something. So I've been really, really privileged. I've gone to the best universities and educational institutions in the world. I have investors who really back me and want me to go push me forward. And I even have a woman investor in Brazil. So I've been really lucky. But there's a point that I want to mention, and that's the fact that I've also worked really hard to get to where I am. And I think that women have a tendency of saying that they've been really lucky of the things that happened to them. But in fact, we've all worked really hard to get to where we are. And I think that that's an important acknowledgement to make. So the other thing that I want to share with you is that my sister told me that we have to have luck. And in Brazil, a lot of kids put their kites in the streets, and so my sister told me that I had to be lucky enough to have the wind blow in the right direction. But first, I had to have my kite up. So that's a little bit about just really working hard and having your kite up, and then having some luck that that things will work out. So I just want to share with you a few of the motivations, and I call this these small revolutions that happened in my life, and the fact that why I became an entrepreneur. So when I was at college, I had the dream about working at the UN. And I wanted to work at the UN because I really just wanted to change the world, I guess. And I studied at UPenn, and I did PPE. My major was PPE, which is politics, philosophy, economics. And it was very hard for me to try to explain to my Brazilian father that I was going to study philosophy in the US. He just didn't understand why I was going to go to the US and study philosophy. And I thought, no, actually, this is going to help me understand some of society's deepest problems. And I'm going to go work at the UN. So I went to Nairobi, and I spent 3 months working at the UN, at headquarters there, at an organization called UN Habitat, which works with the challenges and the big problems of the big cities in the world, right? So things like transportation, health and education, sanitation, and you can imagine the problems are just humongous, right? But that's a topic of another conversation. What I wanted to share with you is that actually working at the UN motivated me to become an entrepreneur. And the reason was because I was 20, and there were a lot of 30-something-year-old just brilliant people working there, and they wanted to share their ideas and wanted to get their innovations across, but it was really hard because the system didn't let them do this. So I was a bit sad because my dream of working for the UN did not turn out to be a reality because I didn't want to wait till I was 60 to put my ideas across. So I actually left Africa quite sad, because for those of you who've been to Africa, and we've heard a lot of presentations about Africa, really know that it's a magical place. But I was determined to go on and to really dream big and do something great. And so the first message that I want to get across is that for me it was so important for me to make sure that, and this is what I want to get across, is to really dream big. And sometimes you have to take risks. And some of them are calculated risks, some are not. But you really have to dream big and go after your passion, right? So the second point I want to share with you is that I feel like it's very important to work on a very meaningful project. So the company that I started in Brazil, EasyLearn, we do products that help people learn, both web and mobile. And we're focused on low to middle income adults who need professional skills. And they have very little time to study and don't have a lot of money either. But they need skills to succeed and to take on jobs. Now, the reason that I wanted to work for the UN primarily was because I wanted to work with economic development. And when I went back to Brazil, after graduating from college, I realized that the biggest hindrance in Brazil to really develop economically was education. Now, you probably all have heard or been to Brazil or know about Brazil. Brazil is a very happy country. It's a very sunny country. There's carnival, soccer, World Cup, Olympics. All of that's great. But we really, really have an education problem in Brazil. And that is the ultimate thing that I feel like we have to overcome and work in Brazil. So I actually grew up in Rio, and I went to the American School, which is one of the most prestigious schools in Rio. And it's located right literally across the street from one of the biggest slums in Rio. And to me, it was just very unfair. And growing up, I saw this dichotomy between my life, very privileged, very protected life, and kids begging for money in the streets. And I just didn't understand why that was like that. And it bothered me since I was a child. So for me, it was obvious and quite natural to work with education, because I thought, the only difference between me and those kids is education, is access to high quality education. So I think that today, and I think we've heard a lot of examples, it's quite impossible to talk about education without talking about technology. Because, and I'm not talking just about, and I think that there's tons of examples of really, really great education technology companies that are doing wonderful things around the world, so I'm not going to get into that. But I think it's a little bit more than just creating cool apps for learning or trying to overcome the fact that school still looks like it was 100 years ago. I think the power in technology and education is really to take high-quality content to where it doesn't exist. And some people call it the non-consumers. I mean, there's tons of ways to describe this. But it's really to take education to where it doesn't exist. And that's very, very powerful. The other thing that technology does is that it's able to personalize learning. And we've heard about personalization in health. And personalization in beauty, and I think personalization in education is also it's extremely important. So, working with education for me is absolutely a blessing, and it's so I think to me I think that we need to choose things that are very meaningful and inspiring, really go out and change the world. So even when I have bad days, I just think about the company and what we're doing, the impact that we're having, and I think it's amazing. The third thing that I like to share with you is the third motivation that I have in becoming an entrepreneur, being an entrepreneur, is being able to give back. Although I'm young and I still have a lot to learn, I especially want to spend my time working and trying to help other young women, especially in Brazil, become entrepreneurs. And I was very shocked. Recently, I went to speak to a professor at a very big university in Brazil, and I think the statistics are very similar to the US, but I went to speak to him because I wanted to bring Women 2.0 to Brazil, and this is, we've talked about this organization here as well. And I asked him, what are some of the examples of the women entrepreneurs in technology in Brazil that I can go speak to come to our event? And he just looked at me very surprised and said, no one. He couldn't think of a single name. So obviously there's something wrong with that picture, and we have to change it. But I think that the fact that we have pretty much no role models in Brazil, very, very few role models, is a very big problem, because women can't even visualize that they can be entrepreneurs. They've never seen it happen. So we just need more examples, more and more examples, and we really need to try to get there. And I also think that there are some cultural barriers. We've heard about a lot of women going through this here in several of the speeches, but I think that women, some of the women look at me like I'm an alien, right? Still in Brazil. It's a very macho society still. And they don't understand why I work so hard, not even some of my coworkers. And sometimes at the expense of my personal life. But you just have to really work hard. And but I think that if we can overcome some of these cultural barriers in Brazil, I think Brazil will actually be an example in the world of women entrepreneurship. We have, in fact, a woman president, and that's already a big, big advancement. But also, women's research already shows in Brazil that women had 53% of the businesses in initial stages. But there's a very important part to that data, which is most of these businesses are started out of necessity and not out of opportunity. So there's a lot of mothers working perhaps in the food or clothing industries that are starting small businesses to just take care of their family. But again, these are small businesses and they're not going to scale. They're not really big technology companies really doing global innovation. But it's a start. 53%. Also in Brazil, women study more than men, just like in the US. There's 30% more women in higher education, so getting more educated. 60% of the household decisions are made by women. So it's a population where women are very present, but women earn 30% less. And I actually thought that I was never going to be an entrepreneur in technology. I studied philosophy, political science, and then education. But I'm very glad I did, because women are represented. Only 12% of the workforce in technology are women. So there's just no women in technology in Brazil, and we really need to change that. And it's similar in the US. It's similar everywhere around the world. So I was actually giving a talk about women entrepreneurship in Brazil, and after the panel, a lady came up to me and she said, well, I have a website, but I think I'm going to quit because I'm going to go home. I just need to go home and take care of my kids. And I asked her, why are you going to quit? And she said, well, I'm actually growing and I need to fundraise, but I'm really, really scared of going in front of men that I don't know. And to me that was quite surprising. She's growing her business, but she wants to stop because now she's scared. So I think that we have to overcome the fact that women sometimes just lack the confidence to go in and really put yourself out there, and because it's a male-dominated space, and it's really hard to do that. And sometimes the guys take it over just because they have more confidence and they don't necessarily have the bright idea. So I think that actually women, the world would be a much better place if there were more women entrepreneurs, simply because women spend money differently, right? Women spend more money on the home and taking care of the family, while men spend more money on personal products. And research also shows that 3 things happen when women's salaries increases in terms of benefits for the family. So the first thing is that nutrition improves. The second thing is that mothers spend more on health. And the third is that kids go to school earlier. So, for me, there's really just no better time to be an entrepreneur, no better time to be a woman entrepreneur, because I think that these conversations are rising all around the world, and it's just really just very important. I just want to close by saying that in Brazil we have a very strong culture of working for the government. And today we have about 11 million people that apply per year for a government job. And the number is supposed to grow to 20 million people by 2014 for only 100,000 spots. There's not enough jobs for everyone in the government. And I think that one of my personal missions is to get some of these people onto the other side and become entrepreneurs and try to change the world. Thank you.